Hello, I'm Chef Susie with Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts, and I'm honored that you allowed us to be a part of your class today, and I'm proud to be a part of the ProStart FCC LA partnership. Today we're presenting to culinary classes from coast to coast, from California to South Carolina. With Auguste Escoffier Schools, we have three options. We have the Austin, Texas campus and the Boulder, Colorado campus, both which offer full-time culinary arts and pastry arts programs. What's unique about the programs is they have an 8 to 10 week externship and also a 3-week farm-to-table program. We also offer an online self-paced program. If you'd like more information, you can visit www.myculinaryfuture.com. Auguste Escoffier is considered the father of modern cuisine, and his influence is seen at all culinary levels today. And we'd like to show you a 9-minute video on his legacy, and when we're finished with the video, I'll be doing a demonstration. And if you have any questions on the demonstration, you can leave them in the comment section.
Welcome to the Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. The culinary field is a fast-moving world where skill, passion, and a zeal for perfection all intersect. It's not for everyone, but for those savoring a truly extraordinary career or is an enthusiast, the experience can be life-changing. At the Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts, our promise to provide you with the most professional training begins with the name in our name, Auguste Escoffier, the father of modern cookery. This French chef, who lived at the turn of the last century, is on par with Edison and Einstein in the transformative influence he had in his field. Escoffier, with his methods, techniques, and recipes, revolutionized the culinary world. His influence is not only infused into everything we do at the Escoffier School, but still guides some of the most celebrated chefs today.
I think that Auguste Escoffier is really sort of the backbone to almost everything we do as chefs.
Before him, the modern restaurant as we think of it today didn't exist.
And Escoffier, to me, means so much because everything that I do on a daily basis, he was the person that set that in motion.
He was a genius in cooking at the time. He was a visionary. He was a great communicator. He touched the lives of both rich and poor with his warmth and artistry.
Escoffier could be likened to Steve Jobs. He may have been the Steve Jobs of his era. For the culinary world, Escoffier is, I mean, he's the big guy. He's the, if we had to put a face on the Mount Rushmore of food, that would be him. You know, he's the president, he's the George Washington, whatever you want to think of it. He's that guy for the food world.
In 1846, Auguste Escoffier was born in the French village of Villeneuve-Loubet, where the Escoffier Foundation and Museum exists today in his childhood home. While he showed promise as an artist, his true talent became apparent when he apprenticed at his uncle's restaurant in Nice. At that time, cooking was not a profession held in high regard. It was a hot, thankless job, rife with uncleanliness and disorder. And so it might have stayed, if not for Escoffier. After a stint as an army chef, he reorganized the kitchen into a military-like brigade system with a clear chain of command headed by supervisors overseeing workers with specific duties in specific locations.
It's basically an army tackling the jobs, and he's the one that kind of said, hey, here's the general, here's the privates, you know, go at it.
There's a lot of things in the kitchen that I think people don't even realize are in place because of Escoffier. You know, the fact that we have a system where there's a chef de cuisine and a sous chef under that and chef de parties under that, kind of the hierarchy of the kitchen and its staff is really because of him.
He was very, very concerned with the atmosphere in his kitchen. He brought pride to the profession. He stressed the importance to run a clean, hygienic, and safe kitchen. We talk about sanitation in today's kitchen. He was well ahead of his time. He believed that well-trained chefs produce truly exceptional food.
In 1890, Escoffier worked with Cesar Ritz of the famous Ritz-Carlton brand. With Ritz, Escoffier transformed the new Savoy Hotel in London into the place to be seen and experience culinary excellence. The pair would eventually move on to manage the Ritz Hotel in Paris and the Carlton Hotel in London, each time with growing success. Escoffier made many innovations at these hotels and changed the way food was served at the table.
He abolished the system where all the food came out all at the same time. And he created service like we do now, which is the food comes out as the guest requested in the order in which it should be eaten. He created that. And I think that that's important to note, that not only was he a culinarian, his influence spread to the front of the house.
He invented countless new dishes, often inspired by guests of the hotels.
I love the fact that Escoffier, when Dame Nellie Melba came, the opera singer, he designed a dessert just for her, which is peach Melba, of course. And then 5 years later, he invents Melba toast. So the idea that some of these recipes he's created are, they're in our lexicon of culinary language now.
Escoffier was also the first chef to organize the kitchens of the luxury transatlantic ocean liners of Europe. On several occasions, he was also asked to plan events and cook for kings and queens. He was fascinated by food science, particularly methods of food preservation. He pioneered the practice of canning tomatoes, helped develop the bouillon cube, and created his own series of bottled sauces and pickles.
Escoffier, to me, is the father of modern cooking. As crazy as we can get with food today, I mean, if you look at molecular gastronomy or the different food movements that are going on in this industry, are the ones who are using Escoffier as a base.
And he held exceedingly modern views in appreciating the symbiotic relationship between food supplier and kitchen.
Escoffier was by far an innovator. Today, our focus, you hear a lot of that, we hear that with the Escoffier School, farm to table, sustainable agriculture, utilizing natural, wholesome ingredients. Well, Escoffier believed in that back then. He was getting asparagus from France, from the source, from the farmer, from the people that were producing those asparagus. So he had already that in mind. He was way ahead of his time.
And he was prolific. He authored over 5,000 recipes in his 8 landmark books, some of which are still published today. Le Guide Culinaire is today considered the Bible of classic cuisine.
Escoffier wrote and documented all these thousands of recipes in one snippet of time in the world of cooking. But he was smart enough to know that time changes and people's tastes change. And he allows for so much flexibility in his food and his recipes. So he had a real vision of what food was at the time that he wrote it, but what food could be with some evolution.
But Escoffier didn't just focus on food, but also on the social concerns of people inside and outside his kitchens.
His mantra is that you started every day fresh. So he gave all his food to charities, to the poor, and paid for it to be transported. And he was the first humanitarian. He was the first one to understand that cooks get injured, cooks are retiring, chefs. He felt a connection to them. And I think that in this day and age is pretty remarkable.
Escoffier died on February 12, 1935, earning the moniker King of Chefs and Chef of Kings. His influence was substantial then and continues to live on.
I have the honor to be the president of Disciple Escoffier International USA. It's a premier gastronomic society that was established in France in 1954 to maintain the good name and tradition of French cuisine. And of course, their goal is very simple, to honor the memory of Escoffier in France and around the world, to promote and preserve his work, to maintain tradition, because it's very important to maintain the tradition, and to promote culinary education and apprenticeship to young people, and to motivate them to become professional chefs.
If I could describe Escoffier in one word, it would be foundation. So to me, he's the foundation of cooking. There's a lot of historical relevance to what he's done,
but he's still relevant to me today, and I use his cookbooks and some of his ideals every single day.
To say that he's the father of modern cooking, I think, is almost an understatement.
Escoffier means a lot of different things, but first and foremost, inspiration.
The base where all modern cuisine that we do now comes from is what Escoffier was doing 100 years ago.
That foundation of being a chef, how to act, the setups in the kitchen, even being inspired by the food of the land and seasons and things like that. You know, all of that is reference to Escoffier and how he cooked back in the day.
We are proud to work with the Escoffier Foundation and Museum and Michel Escoffier, great-grandson of Auguste Escoffier and a member of our advisory board, to continue this legacy of excellence. We welcome you to our school in the spirit of Escoffier and sincerely hope you take the next step and become part of something bigger than yourself.
So for our choux paste, we're going to be cooking the paste on the stove, and then we're going to pull it off and add the eggs. So for the paste itself, I have water and I have butter, which I'm going to put in my pot, and I've got a little bit of salt too. I'm going to sprinkle that in, and I'm going to put this on the stove and I'm going to bring it to a boil. So speaking of recipes, this recipe calls for water and butter and of course a little bit of salt. And you're going to find different recipes. Some recipes may have a little bit of milk in them, some may have shortening, but this is a good recipe to have under your belt. Keep it in your collection until you find something maybe that you like better. But it's just, there's variations with everything out there. But I found this to be a really nice recipe, and I think you'll be happy with it. So I'm going to bring this to a boil. It's going to take a little while. I've got my butter, which is room temperature, and my water was also room temperature, and my salt. And we're going to mix in the flour after it comes to a boil. And I find that mixing in my flour in the beginning, I like to use the whisk, a hand whisk, and then switch over to a wooden spoon. And wooden spoons are so helpful in the pastry kitchen because your hand doesn't slide around on them if you get a little bit of grease on it. And when you're working on the stove with something warm, this is not going to heat up and it's not going to burn your hand as if you had like a stainless steel spoon that's kind of sticking off the side here, and that can get quite hot and burn you. Some of them have handles, but also the wooden spoons don't scrape the bottom of the pot, and it's not going to damage a pot that you have either. So these are nice to have. I have a lot of them at home, and I'm sure that you'll have a lot in your collection. So I've got my stove a little high, got a little ahead of myself there. So we're just going to let this warm up nicely and then add the flour in. When you're in a commercial kitchen someday, if that's the path that you're going to take, you may be making a big pot of this on the stove. And this is really where using the whisk in the beginning to start the flour so you're not getting a lot of lumps, and then switch over to your spoon. It's going to give you a really big advantage rather than pouring flour into a liquid and trying to get all those lumps out. Start with the whisk, and if you try it, you'll see what I mean. So this is coming to a boil, so I'm going to pull it off the stove. It's nice and hot, and I'm going to add my bread flour. I'm going to use my whisk attachment, my hand whisk, just to kind of get it going. So I'm not getting a lot of lumps in there, and it's pretty well incorporated. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my wooden spoon so I can really get my paste going. And then I'm going to be returning it back to the stove. So this is similar if anyone's taken culinary or if you've done a lot of cooking. This is just really similar to a roux that you would use for thickening some of your basic savory sauces. So maybe some of you have made it before. So I'm just stirring with my wooden spoon, which is not burning my hand. And this is going to get a thin film on the bottom of the pot, and the film is helping me kind of work this around, so it's actually cooking it a little bit. And you're not going to want to do this in a non-stick pot because it doesn't have anything to stick to, and you'll kind of end up pan frying the dough because there is fat in here, there's a lot of butter in here, so try to use just a regular pot. And don't be worried when you see the film on the bottom. Even if it gets a little bit brown on you, it's not going to burn. You're not going to have it on the stove that long, and it's going to clean up nicely. You just have to soak it when you're done. But keep in mind too, with your pots and soaking your pot, you don't want to take a pot from the hot stove and put it right into water, especially cold water. That can damage the pot, the shock from the hot to the cold, and it can actually warp your nice pot. So let it cool off to the side, and then soak it in some water later, and it's going to clean up nice. This is just some flour and water and butter, and I do this all the time at home in a little pot just like this, and it cleans up just fine after I soak it. Softens really nice. So we're cooking this pretty good here. It's got the nice film, and it's really sticking when I'm bringing it around the pot. So it looks like it's pretty well done. It's kind of holding its shape, and it's not sticking to the sides much. So we're going to turn off our flame, and then we're going to turn this mixture into the mixer. You can do this by hand, but it's kind of hard. I like to do it on the machine. It's much easier. But you can mix it by hand, 1 egg at a time. So we're going to put it on our mixer with the paddle attachment. Kind of get it all in there. Okay. This is pretty hot, so you're going to want to let it cool off a little bit. I'm just going to give it a few spins, but I just wanted to talk for a minute. I'm going to keep it on low. You can overmix this, so be careful. See, all the steam is coming off of it. So knowing that, we're going to start by adding just 1 egg at a time. You may end up dropping in a little bit more, a second one, but try to just do 1 at a time. Give it a chance to get incorporated, and then go ahead and add the other one. Scrape down really good in between. If you add all these eggs in at once, it's not going to be able to catch up for some time, and you're going to end up overworking your dough. You put some structure in by cooking it on the stove, and you don't want to destroy any of that. So just be patient. This is going to take a while, especially if you're making a big batch in a commercial kitchen. You may be putting a gallon of eggs in there, so just do a little bit at a time. You don't have to do 1 at a time. If it's a big batch, you'll probably do maybe a half a quart at a time if you're using a gallon, but just be patient and take your time. I'm going to go ahead and add another one. Like I said, sometimes they run in together, that's fine, just as long as you're not putting all the eggs in at one time. Once this gets incorporated, I'm going to be scraping it down. And this is a dough that you want to use it the same day that you make it. If you put it in the refrigerator overnight, it changes a little bit. It doesn't seem to have the same structure that it had the same day. So use this the same day that you're making it. When you bake off the cream puffs, they freeze really well, but you don't want to freeze or refrigerate the dough unless you really have to. So go ahead and make a big batch and then freeze what you don't need, and you can keep them in the freezer for maybe, I would say, at least 30 days. They stay really nice, and then after that they kind of start to get a little freezer burn, so just be careful. So our pâte à choux is coming along just fine. It looks great. It shouldn't separate on you. It may kind of have some chunks in it when you first start adding your eggs, but it really shouldn't separate at all. It should stay together. And as soon as this third egg is mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and add the last one. This is completely mixed together, and I'm just going to give it another scraping because I have a little bit of thickness in the bottom from the batter that doesn't have egg in it. So it's a nice recipe. It turned out perfect. I think you'll like this one a lot, and it tastes good and it bakes up nice. It's got a nice color. So this is the batter. It's completely finished. And like I said, if you don't, this is one of these recipes that you may not get it on the first try when you make it, but don't be discouraged. It's not at all uncommon. Just make it again. It just has a few simple ingredients to it. So when you start getting into those expensive things like chocolates, you want to be really careful. So the batter is just perfect, and it's just kind of a little bit warm. And this dough is great for making cream puffs or eclairs, and you can also do a little bit decorative swan, which is made out of this dough too. So we're going to do a couple different pipings here. My bag, since the batter is kind of thick, I'm not putting it in a container. I'm just holding it folded over because I can push it down. It's not going to go down by itself. When you're making this batter, if it's runny, there's something wrong with it. And I would recommend making it again. It shouldn't just come running out of the bag. So I've got some trays with some parchment paper. I like to use parchment when I'm doing my pâte à choux because the dough seems to stick to it better. Sometimes when I'm piping on a sprayed tray, it comes up a little bit, but the sprayed trays or butter trays will work. I'm dabbing a little bit of the batter on the corners of my parchment to hold it down. The same way I did with the Viennese cookies. Then you don't have your parchment coming up when you're piping. You can just focus on your piping. You're not worried about pressing it down. So we're going to make some cream puffs in the same shape that we made some of the cookies. We're just going to do the E. So I'm going around and I'm stopping piping and then I'm picking up. So I'm going around and I'm stopping my piping and then I'm pulling my bag up. Kind of the same motion. And I'm going around and I'm stopping and then I'm pulling it up. And if you get these little tips, you can just kind of push them down, or you can put your finger in a little bit of water too and just press it down. That'll work just fine. Same with the cookies. And then we're going to make some eclairs, which are just long. So I'm squeezing and then I'm stopping and I'm pulling up and I'm going a little bit forward so I don't get like a tip or a little tail on it. And as you can see, the dough is smooth and it's lump free and it's not separated. So these are going to make some nice little miniature chocolate eclairs. You can also make a larger version of the cream puff or the eclair by just making it bigger, and I'll just show you an example. You can make a bigger size, maybe double in size. Just keep in mind it's going to bake longer. And you can do a larger eclair by kind of doing a little bit of an E motion or a back and forth, and that's going to make a large eclair. And then for the swan body, we're going to do more like a shell. So I'm just squeezing and then pulling and creating a tail. And that's going to be the body of the swan itself. So keep in mind when you're baking these that I've got 2 bigger pieces on my tray, and then all of the other pieces are the same size. You usually want to keep them separate, but I was just kind of doing an example. So when the smaller ones are finished, I'm going to remove the larger ones and continue baking them on a separate tray. So when you have large and small, keep in mind they're going to have different baking times. If you want to keep them on the same tray, and then just remove them, or if you just want to put them on different trays. But be mindful of that. And next I wanted to show you the swan neck and head for our swan that we're going to be making with our shell. So I made some earlier, so I have a little dough in my bag, and I just have a small round tip. And with this, I'm going to kind of do almost like an S motion, but it's going to be a little backward. So you're just creating a head and then a curved neck, however you want to pipe it. I like to make a round bottom on mine because when I stand them up into the swan body itself with the whipped cream, it seems to hold a little bit better. Sometimes you'll see the necks like this and they just kind of stop, but I like to put that little curve on the bottom because it just seems to add some structure. And these are much smaller, much more delicate, so you're going to bake them a lot less. I think they're going to bake in about half the time. But like anything, when you put it in the oven, you own it, keep an eye on it. Don't always rely on timers or the time that it says on the recipe. Keep an eye on it, put the light on, watch it through the window. And you can also, in time, when you're baking these things a lot, you'll know the smell when it's done too, so you'll be able to smell it. So knowing that, these are the swan necks. So next we're going to egg wash the cream puffs, the eclairs, and the swan necks, and then we're going to put them in the oven. So you're just going to run a little bit of egg wash gently on the top. You don't have to have a lot, otherwise you're going to get a little puddle. And this is just going to add color, and it's going to add a little bit of shine to this. Okay, just go over them really gently. You don't have to dip your brush every time. There's enough on there. And with the heads and the bodies, I just kind of start at the top and I just go around, and I've just got just enough on there to coat it, and I'm just barely touching it. Definitely don't press down. It's kind of a sticky dough, and you're going to get stuck to your brush. Just kind of take your time and be gentle with it. So I just put a small cake pan of water in my oven, and as you can see, it's steaming, and it's creating just enough steam for a small oven. So we're going to go ahead and bake these for 10 minutes and then take out our steam, and then we're going to bake for another 20 minutes. So I'm going to kind of move the steam to the bottom. So knowing that, I baked off some earlier. So let's take a look at these and talk about them a little bit. Okay, so I've got some mini eclairs that I baked earlier. And as you can see, everything is golden brown. It's holding its shape. I've got my cream puffs here. These are my swan bodies. They lost their shape a little bit, but you can see how they have the tip on the end. And these are my swan heads and necks. And everything is golden brown. It held its shape. It puffed up. If you don't bake these enough, they're going to sink on you. And when they sink, you're not going to have the air pocket on the inside that's going to hold your custards and your creams. As you can see, there's an air pocket on the inside, and that's what's going to hold your custards and your creams for your chocolate eclairs or your cream puffs if you decide not to slice them and fill them whole. So be mindful of that. If you're not sure if it's done, go ahead and leave it in for an extra minute or two. You're not going to burn it unless it's already burning. With that extra minute or two, it may just need that to dry it out. They're going to be nice and golden brown in color, and they're going to have very little lightness to them. This one has a little bit of lightness, but as you can see, mostly they're uniform golden brown. And they're also going to, they kind of foam a little bit when they're in the oven, and when that foaming stops, that means they're done too. So be very careful that you don't underbake these, because they're going to sink and they're going to be doughy, and you're just not going to have that nice look. So knowing that, we're going to go ahead and start some whipped cream so we can assemble a couple of these. And I'm just going to use some heavy cream on the machine. with the whisk attachment. Okay, I've got my heavy cream, which I just took out before we started the show, so it's cold. You don't want this at room temperature whipped cream when you're whipping it, so always keep it cold. So I've got a couple of cups here. I'm just going to add some in. And I like to use granulated sugar for my sweetener, and typically I'll use maybe 1 tablespoon of sugar for 1 cup of cream. And you can just kind of sprinkle it in. And if you like it a little sweeter, you can make it a little, put in a little bit more sugar. And I'm just going to mix this on a medium speed until it becomes thick. We're going to slice some of these cream puffs in half, and the Swans too, and then we're going to fill them with our whipped cream, which I'm keeping an eye on so I don't over whip it. So I like to use either a small knife to cut these, because they're kind of delicate, or a serrated knife. So I'm just slicing it in half, and it's got a nice crunchy crust that's not too thick, and you can see the hollowness. This is exactly how this is supposed to look. It's baked properly, and you have a lot of hollowness to it. And if it's not baked, it's just going to be doughy when you cut into it. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and cut another one. And these are really nice if you fill them with ice creams too. Something easy to do. You can buy some nice ice creams, your favorite creams. Okay, our whipped cream is just about done. Getting nice and thick, holding its shape, not separating at all. When you overmix this, it's going to separate, and if it gets too warm too, it'll also separate. So that is just perfect. And I'm also going to cut a couple of the swan bodies too, which are these kind of shell-shaped ones that I made. So the swan, I'm going to be cutting it, and then I'm going to cut the top in half, and that's going to be the wings for the swan. And these are fun to make, and you will impress all of your friends with them. And you can also make these larger too, make bigger swans. Just kind of making some little things for us today. Okay. So knowing that, we're just going to go ahead and fill a few of these and finish them up. And if you have any more questions, I would love to hear them. Okay, so I've got my whipped cream, which is whipped perfectly. And I got a pastry bag with a star tip, and I'm just folding it over, and I'm just going to fill it by hand. It's not going to run down on me like the pâte à choux dough. And like I said earlier, this is called choux paste, pâte à choux, known as cream puffs or profiteroles. Those are just a couple of terms that are used for the same thing. So if you hear those, you'll know what they mean. So our whipped cream is nice and firm, not separated. And I'm just going to be piping it into this cream puff shell. And I'm going a little high to get a little bit of height. Uh-oh, I've got a bottom here. Make sure you keep your tops and your bottoms separate. So knowing that, we're going to assemble 2 of our swans.
Another question, please.
So I'm going to put the cream in the bottom of the swan. And this is the base for the body. So knowing that, we're going to go ahead and assemble our swan. I'm going to take one of the necks, and I'm just going to be pressing it in, and I'm going to push it all the way to the bottom. And they're so cute, and they're so easy, and everyone's going to be so impressed when you make these. See what I mean about the curved bottom? It kind of, when I push all the way down to the bottom, it's kind of helping it hold its place a little bit. So I've got my wings, and I'm just going to kind of angle them on. Sometimes you might need to add just a little bit of extra cream because I have the foot there, so I'm just going to add a little bit of extra cream. So I have my swan wings with the straight edge that I cut when I cut it in half, And I'm just going to put them on the body, kind of angled up a little bit. And they're not so delicate where you can't move them around. You can kind of move them around a little bit without hurting them. So once again, I cut the top in half to form the wings. And I'm just going to angle the wings like this on top. And then your swan is done. And these are also nice with flavored creams, and with the holiday coming up, the Easter holiday, you can flavor them with some strawberry and add a little bit of pink color. It looks very pretty. A little bit of lemon, add a little bit of yellow color. Very nice. You'll be impressing all of your friends and family. So I'm going to dust these with powdered sugar. You can drizzle the puffs with chocolate or dip them in chocolate when you're filling them whole, but the swans always like to put powdered sugar on. So I'm just putting a nice dusting of powdered sugar. It makes a really big difference on just the little cream puff and the swan. And then we're just going to put these on a plate with just some chocolate sauce. Really simple little thing that you can do so easily for your friends and family. I've got some chocolate sauce, and maybe we'll go the other way too. We'll kind of do a little bit of a chocolate sauce grid. And they present nicely. You can do this on a larger platter if you're having a party. It's just a nice representation. Something very simple. I just used some plain cream and some pâte and it just looks so nice. There we go. I hope you enjoyed the demo and Escoffier lesson for today. We'll be offering many scholarships this year for high school seniors, so please remember to visit www.myculinaryfuture.com to download free recipe guides and also to request information and to be put on our list for upcoming program offerings and scholarship deadlines. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.